The pencil snapped between my fingers, and I stared at the broken halves, my frustration mirroring the splintered wood. I tossed them onto my cluttered desk and leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, reminding me of the looming deadline. "Helena!" Ethan's voice boomed from downstairs. "Where are you? Dinner's getting cold." I sighed, glancing at my unfinished storyboard. "Coming!" I called back, reluctantly pushing away from my desk. As I descended the stairs, the aroma of garlic and herbs wafted up, making my stomach growl. Ethan stood at the bottom, arms crossed, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "You've been up there for hours," he said, his tone clipped. "I thought we agreed you'd take a break tonight." I forced a smile. "I'm sorry, I lost track of time. The publisher wants to see progress on the new storyline, and The publisher this, the deadline that," Ethan interrupted, throwing his hands up. "When was the last time we had a proper conversation that didn't revolve around your work?" The word stung, but I bit back a retort. "Let's just have dinner, okay? I'm starving." We sat at the table, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. I picked at my food, my appetite suddenly gone. "So," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "any plans to rejoin the land of the living anytime soon?" I set my fork down with a clatter. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of being married to a ghost," he snapped. "You're either locked away in your office or zoned out thinking about your next project. We haven't been on a date in months, Helena." "I'm working towards something important," I defended. "This contract could change everything for us." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Us? There is no us anymore. It's just you and your precious graphic novels." The words hit me like a slap. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's not fair, and you know it." "Isn't it?" Ethan challenged, rising to his feet. "When was the last time you did anything around the house? The laundry's piling up, the fridge is empty, and I can't remember the last time we had sex." I felt my cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. "I didn't realize I was supposed to be your maid and your personal porn star." Ethan's eyes widened, then narrowed. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. I just want my wife back." "I'm right here," I shouted, gesturing wildly. "I'm sorry if my career is inconvenient for you, but I'm not going to apologize for pursuing my dreams." "Your dreams," Ethan repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "What about our dreams, Helena? What about the family we talked about, the life we planned together?" I felt the fight drain out of me, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "People change, Ethan. Dreams change." "Yeah," he said, turning away. "I'm starting to see that." As he walked out of the room, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from my publisher. "Contract's ready. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. to sign. This is your big break, Helena." I stared at the message, my heart pounding with excitement and dread. This was everything I'd worked for, but at what cost? The sound of the front door slamming jolted me from my thoughts. I rushed to the window, watching Ethan's car peel out of the driveway and disappear down the street. As I stood there, alone in the quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to take a leap that would change everything. I arrived at the publishing house the next morning, my nerves jangling like loose change in a pocket. The contract signing went smoothly, but as I left the building, my elation was tempered by the memory of Ethan's angry departure the night before. My phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, but I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Where are you?" His voice was cold, controlled. "I just finished the meeting with my publisher. I signed the contract." A long pause. "So you went ahead with it, without even discussing it with me?" "Ethan, we've talked about this for months. It's not like it's a surprise." "No, what's a surprise is coming home to find the house a mess and my wife gone." I felt a flash of anger. "I'm not your maid, Ethan. I have a career." "A career," he scoffed. "Is that what you call neglecting everything else in your life?" "That's not fair. You know what's not fair? Coming home to an empty fridge and a pile of laundry. Maybe, if you spent half as much time on our home as you do on your little drawings, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears pricking my eyes. "Helena? Is everything okay?" I turned to see Elijah, my old school friend, standing behind me. His concerned face was a welcome sight. "Elijah, what are you doing here?" He grinned. I work just down the street. Saw you coming out looking like you'd seen a ghost. Want to grab a coffee? At the cafe, I poured out my troubles to Elijah. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. Helena, you can't let Ethan make you feel guilty for pursuing your dreams, he said finally. Your talent is a gift. Don't let anyone dim your light. I smiled weakly. Thanks, Elijah. It's just, I feel like I'm losing him, like I have to choose between my marriage and my career. Elijah leaned forward. A real partner would support your ambitions, not resent them. Have you considered that maybe Ethan's the one who needs to change, not you? His words struck a chord, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. We need to talk. Be home by 6. I said goodbye to Elijah and headed home, my stomach in knots. When I arrived, Ethan was waiting in the living room, his face like thunder. I've been thinking, he began without preamble. This isn't working. Something has to change. I agree, I said cautiously. We need to find a better balance. No, he cut me off. You need to decide what's more important, your little hobby or our marriage. I felt like I'd been slapped. My little hobby is my career, Ethan. It's part of who I am. And what about who we are? He demanded. What about the life we planned, the family we talked about? Plans change, Ethan. People grow. His laugh was bitter. Grow apart, you mean? That's not what I'm done competing with your drawings for your attention, he interrupted. Either you start acting like a proper wife, or... He left the threat hanging, but its implication was clear. I felt a chill run down my spine. Or what? I whispered. Ethan's eyes were cold. Or maybe it's time we both reconsider this marriage. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. In that moment, I realized we were standing on the edge of a precipice, and the ground beneath us was crumbling fast. As I looked at Ethan, the man I had loved for so long, I couldn't help but wonder. Was this the beginning of the end, or just the end of the beginning? The days following Ethan's ultimatum were a blur of tension and unspoken accusations. We danced around each other like wary boxers, neither willing to throw the first punch. I buried myself in my work, using my art as a shield against the growing chasm between us. One evening, as I searched for a misplaced sketch in Ethan's home office, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Tucked away in his desk drawer was a stack of credit card bills, hidden beneath a pile of mundane paperwork. My hands trembled as I pulled them out, my eyes widening at the charges for luxury hotels I'd never heard of. What are you doing? I whirled around to find Ethan standing in the doorway, his face a mask of anger and... Was that fear? I was looking for a sketch, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I held up the bills. What are these, Ethan? He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, snatching the papers from my hand. Those are private. You had no right to go through my things. Private? I echoed, incredulous. We're married, Ethan. Since when do we keep secrets? His laugh was harsh, bitter. That's rich coming from you. You've been keeping plenty of secrets lately, haven't you? Locking yourself away, choosing your work over me. I felt my temper flare. My work isn't a secret, Ethan. It's my career, my passion. But this, I gestured to the bills he was clutching. This looks like something else entirely. You wouldn't understand, he muttered, turning away. Then help me understand, I pleaded. What's going on, Ethan? Who were you with at those hotels? He spun back to face me, his eyes blazing. Is that what you think? That I'm cheating on you? What am I supposed to think? I shot back. You've been distant, angry, and now these bills? Maybe if you paid half as much attention to our marriage as you do to your little comic books, you wouldn't have to ask these questions, he spat. The words stung, but I stood my ground. Don't turn this around on me. I'm not the one with unexplained hotel stays on my credit card. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He slammed the bills down on the desk, making me flinch. I don't have to explain myself to you, not when you've made it clear where your priorities lie. My priorities? I echoed, disbelieving. You're the one who gave me an ultimatum, Ethan. You're the one who told me to choose between my career and our marriage. Because I'm tired of being second best, he roared. I'm tired of coming home to an empty house, of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. We stood there, chests heaving, the air between us crackling with tension. In that moment, I saw a stranger standing before me, not the man I'd married. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Who are you? I whispered, more to myself than to him. Ethan's face softened for a moment, a flicker of the man I once knew shining through. But then the mask slammed back into place. "I could ask you the same thing," he said coldly. He brushed past me, pausing at the door. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." The front door slammed moments later, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. I sank into Ethan's chair, my mind reeling. The credit card bills lay scattered on the desk, each one a damning piece of evidence. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered trust, a chilling thought crept into my mind. What if I didn't really know Ethan at all? And more terrifyingly, what if I no longer recognized the person I'd become? The questions swirled in my head, unanswered and menacing. One thing was clear. Our marriage was balanced on a knife's edge, and I had a sinking feeling we were about to fall. The days after discovering the hotel bills were a haze of suspicion and doubt. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to those damning pieces of paper. Ethan's behavior grew increasingly erratic, his mood swinging between cold indifference and explosive anger. One afternoon, I decided to confront him directly. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I found him in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables for dinner. "Ethan, we need to talk about those bills," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He slammed the knife down, making me jump. "I told you to drop it, Helena. It's none of your business." "None of my business?" I echoed, incredulous. "I'm your wife. If you're—" I couldn't bring myself to say the word cheating. Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Oh, now you remember you're my wife? Funny how that only matters when it suits you." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression changing subtly. "I have to go out," he said abruptly, heading for the door. Something in his tone made me suspicious. "Where are you going?" "Work emergency," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. On impulse, I grabbed my keys. "I'll come with you." Ethan's face paled. "No, it's fine, I won't be long." But I was already following him out the door. He drove erratically, constantly checking his rearview mirror. I stayed a few cars behind, my heart pounding. He pulled into the parking lot of an upscale hotel. I watched, stunned, as a young woman with long blonde hair rushed out to meet him. They embraced, and my world shattered. I sat in my car, trembling, as they disappeared into the hotel. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, they emerged, laughing and holding hands. As they reached Ethan's car, the woman, Angie, I would later learn, kissed him passionately. It was like a knife to my heart. I don't remember driving home. I was numb, moving on autopilot. When Ethan returned hours later, I was waiting. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He froze, his eyes darting around the room. "Helena, I can explain." "How long?" I repeated, each word sharp as glass. Ethan's shoulders slumped. 6 months. He admitted. The truth hit me like a physical blow. 6 months, half a year of lies, of betrayal. "Why?" I choked out, his face contorted with anger. "Because she makes me feel wanted, Helena. She doesn't disappear into her work for days on end. She's there for me, really there." "So this is my fault?" I asked, incredulous. "You're never here," he shouted. "You're always working, always with your head in the clouds. I needed someone who saw me, who put me first." His words stung, but a part of me recognized the truth in them. Had I really been so absent? "I put you first by supporting us while you chased your dreams," I said quietly. "I put you first by believing in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself." Ethan's face softened for a moment, then hardened again. "It's not enough, Helena. I need more. I need a real wife, not just a roommate who occasionally remembers I exist." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" I asked, my voice hollow. His eyes met mine, cold and determined. "I want you to quit, give up this graphic novel nonsense and be the wife I need. Or—" He left the ultimatum unspoken, but I heard it loud and clear. My career or my marriage. My passion or my partner. As I stood there facing the man I thought I knew, I realized I was at a crossroads. The decision I made now would shape the rest of my life. The question was, could I live with either choice? The days following Ethan's ultimatum were a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my work, desperately trying to ignore the gaping wound in my heart. But every time I looked up from my drafting table, the empty house seemed to mock me. One afternoon, I emerged from my studio to find Ethan standing in the living room, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "What is this?" he demanded, gesturing to the pile of laundry on the couch, the dishes in the sink, the layer of dust on every surface. I blinked, disoriented. Had it really been that long since I'd done any housework? "I've been working on a deadline," I started to explain, but Ethan cut me off. "Always with the deadlines," he exploded. "What about your responsibilities here? What about being a wife?" The words stung, but I felt my own anger rising to meet his. "Being a wife doesn't mean being your maid, Ethan, and it certainly doesn't mean giving up my career for your comfort." His eyes narrowed. "So that's your decision, then? Your little comic books over our marriage?" "They're not just comic books," I snapped. "They're my passion, my art, and unlike you, they don't demand I give up everything I am to be worthy of them." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line. Ethan's face went white, then red with fury. "If that's how you feel," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "then maybe we don't have anything left to discuss." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, shaking, as the silence of the house closed in around me. Hours passed, the sun set, casting long shadows across the cluttered living room. I was about to call Ethan when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jean, our elderly neighbor and an old family friend, standing on the porch. "Helena, dear," he said, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. "I saw Ethan tear out of here earlier. Is everything all right?" Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story, the fights, the affair, the ultimatum. Jean listened patiently, his weathered face growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Helena, I've known you and Ethan since you were newlyweds." "The man you're describing, that's not the Ethan I know." I laughed bitterly. Maybe none of us really knew him. Jean shook his head. "No, that's not what I mean. The Ethan I know would never give you an ultimatum like that. He was always so proud of your talent, your drive." His words made me pause. It was true, Ethan had once been my biggest cheerleader. When had that changed? "Something doesn't add up," Jean continued. "Have you considered that there might be more to this story than you know?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Jean leaned in, his voice low. "I've seen some strange things lately. Late-night phone calls, mysterious visitors when you're not home. I think there's more going on with Ethan than just an affair." My mind reeled. What was Jean suggesting? That Ethan was involved in something even worse than infidelity? "What should I do?" I whispered, feeling lost and overwhelmed. Jean's eyes met mine, steady and determined. "You need to dig deeper, Helena, for your sake and for Ethan's. There are secrets here that need to come to light." As Jean's words sank in, I felt a shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but now they were joined by a fierce determination. If there were secrets to uncover, I would find them. I looked at Jean, my jaw set. "You're right, it's time I got some real answers." As Jean left, I stood in the doorway, watching the night settle over our quiet street. I knew that whatever I discovered next would change everything, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter the cost. Jean's words echoed in my mind as I stood in our bedroom, my hands trembling as I rifled through Ethan's belongings. I felt like a thief in my own home, but I needed answers. The guilt gnawing at me was nothing compared to the desperation clawing at my chest. That's when I found it, a hotel loyalty card I'd never seen before, tucked away in the back of his wallet. My heart raced as I examined it, noting the high-end chain's logo. This was it, the smoking gun I'd been looking for. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and downloaded a GPS tracking app. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the install button. Was I really going to do this? Invade Ethan's privacy so completely? But then I remembered the lipstick stain I'd found on his collar last week, the hushed phone calls, the way he'd pull away when I tried to touch him. I hit install. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and adrenaline. I played the part of the oblivious wife, all while obsessively checking the app. Ethan's movements became a roadmap of betrayal, frequent stops at unfamiliar addresses, long stays at hotels across town. One evening, as we sat in stony silence at the dinner table, my phone buzzed. Ethan had just checked into the same hotel where I'd first seen him with Angie. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with false concern. I forced a smile. Just work stuff, nothing important. He nodded, already losing interest. I have to go out of town this weekend, business trip. The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it made me sick. Oh? Where to? Just a conference upstate. Boring stuff. I nodded, my mind racing. This was it, my chance to catch him red-handed. The next day I followed him at a distance, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he'd hear it even from his own car. We ended up at a luxurious resort, the kind of place we used to dream about visiting together. I watched from across the parking lot as Angie ran to greet him, throwing her arms around his neck. They kissed passionately, oblivious to the world around them, oblivious to me, watching from the shadows, my world crumbling. Tears blurred my vision as I fumbled for my phone, snapping picture after picture. Each click of the camera felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. As they disappeared into the resort, arm in arm, I sat in my car, overwhelmed by the weight of what I'd discovered. It wasn't just an affair, it was a whole other life Ethan had built without me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elijah. "How are you holding up? Want to grab coffee?" I stared at the message, a lifeline in the storm of my emotions. Elijah had been my rock through all of this, a reminder that not everyone in my life was a liar. But as I was about to reply, another notification popped up. The tracking app. Ethan was on the move again. My finger hovered between Elijah's message and the app. In that moment, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could turn back now, pretend I never saw any of this, and try to salvage what was left of my marriage. Or I could push forward, uncover the full extent of Ethan's betrayal and face the consequences. The choice seemed impossible. My hand shook as I looked from my phone to the resort where my husband was with another woman. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was a lie. And now I had to decide, did I want the comforting illusion or the painful truth? As the sun set over the resort, casting long shadows across the parking lot, I made my decision. There was no turning back now. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. With a deep breath, I started my car. It was time to confront Ethan and reclaim my life, whatever the cost. My hands shook as I dialed Ethan's parents. I'd never imagined I'd be making this call, but I needed allies. To my surprise, they believed me instantly. "We've suspected something was wrong for a while," his mother said, her voice tight with anger. "We'll meet you there." The next morning I stood in the resort lobby, flanked by Ethan's parents. My heart raced as we approached the front desk. "We're here to surprise Ethan," I said, forcing a smile. The receptionist, sensing the tension, hesitated before giving us a key card. As we rode the elevator, Ethan's father placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Helena," he said softly. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We paused outside the room. I could hear muffled laughter from inside. With a deep breath, I swiped the key card. The door swung open. Ethan and Angie froze mid-embrace, their faces a mask of shock and horror. "Helena?" Ethan gasped, stumbling backward. "Mom? Dad? What are you?" "Save it," I snapped, my voice steadier than I felt. I pulled out my phone, showing him the tracking app. "I know everything, Ethan. The hotels, the lies, all of it." Angie scrambled to gather her things, her face burning with shame. Ethan's parents stood silent, their disappointment palpable. "Helena, please," Ethan begged, reaching for me. "I can explain." I stepped back, my anger rising. "Explain what? How you've been living a double life? How you made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong?" "I never meant to hurt you," he stammered. A bitter laugh escaped me. "You gave me an ultimatum, Ethan. My career or our marriage, all while you were sneaking around with her." I gestured to Angie, who flinched, and then Ethan's father stepped forward, his face a storm of anger. "Son, how'd you do this? To Helena? To your family?" "Dad, Ethan started, but his mother cut him off. "We raised you better than this," she said, her voice quivering with disappointment. As the reality of the situation sank in, Ethan's facade crumbled. He sank onto the bed, head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But his words felt hollow. I looked at the man I'd loved, the life we'd built, and felt nothing but a vast, aching emptiness. "I want a divorce," I said, the words ringing with finality. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "No, Helena, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything." "It's too late," I interrupted. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." As I turned to leave, Angie spoke up. Helena, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I held up a hand, silencing her. Save it. You're welcome to him. With that, I walked out of the room, out of the marriage that had defined me for so long. Ethan's parents followed, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his choices. In the elevator, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to fade. My knees buckled, and Ethan's mother caught me, pulling me into a fierce hug. You're so brave, she whispered. We're here for you, whatever you need. As we exited the resort, the bright sunlight felt like a spotlight on my pain. But beneath the hurt and betrayal, I felt something else stirring. A sense of freedom, of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine in years. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my wedding ring on my finger. With trembling hands, I slipped it off, staring at the small circle of gold that had once meant everything. What now? Ethan's father asked gently. I closed my fist around the ring, feeling the metal bite into my palm. Now, I said, my voice growing stronger, I start over, on my own terms. As we drove away from the resort, leaving Ethan and our shattered marriage behind, I felt a strange mix of grief and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was mine to choose. The weeks following the confrontation at the resort were a whirlwind of lawyers, paperwork, and tears. Ethan begged and pleaded, promising to change, swearing he'd do anything to save our marriage. But the trust was shattered, and I knew there was no going back. I stood in my living room, surrounded by boxes. The house that had once been our shared dream now felt like a prison of memories. I'd decided to sell it, to cut all ties with the life I'd shared with Ethan. As I taped up another box, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, looking haggard and desperate. Helena, please, he said, his voice breaking. Don't do this. We can work it out. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. Anything you want. I felt a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by the memory of his betrayal. It's too late, Ethan. We're done. He fell to his knees, grabbing my hands. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I gently pulled away. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. You wouldn't have tried to force me to give up my dreams. I was wrong, he sobbed. I see that now. Please, give me another chance. For a moment, I wavered. The familiar pull of our shared history tugged at my heart. But then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the passion for my work that had sustained me through the darkest days. No, I said firmly. I deserve better, and I'm choosing myself. As I closed the door on Ethan's broken form, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I turned back to the boxes, now seeing them not as an end, but as a beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from my publisher. Final draft received. It's brilliant, Helena. This could be your breakout work. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and excitement. My graphic novel, born from the pain and growth of the past months, was ready to meet the world. There was a knock at the door. This time, it was Elijah, arms full of packing tape and bubble wrap. Reinforcements have arrived, he announced with a grin. As we worked, Elijah regaled me with stories of his latest adventures, making me laugh for the first time in what felt like ages. I realized how much I'd missed this simple friendship, unmarred by expectations or betrayal. You know, Elijah said as we sealed the last box, I always knew you were strong, but the way you've handled all this, you're a freaking superhero, Helena. I blushed, but stood a little straighter. I don't know about superhero, but I do feel free, like I can finally be myself without apology. As the moving truck pulled away with the last of my belongings, I stood on the front lawn, keys in hand. Ethan's parents pulled up, here to support me one last time. We're so proud of you, Ethan's mother said, hugging me tight. You'll always be family to us, no matter what. I handed them the keys. Thank you for everything. With a deep breath, I walked away from the house, from the life I'd thought I wanted. Each step felt lighter, filled with possibility. Elijah waited by his car. Ready for your new adventure? I looked back at the house one last time, then turned to face the open road ahead. More than ready. As we drove away, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. It felt like a sign, an ending, yes, but also a beautiful new beginning. I thought of my graphic novel, of the strong, resilient heroine I'd created. I realized now that she wasn't just a character. She was the woman I'd become through this ordeal. You know, I said to Elijah, I think I have an idea for my next book. He grinned. I can't wait to read it. As the familiar streets of my old life faded in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would lead. I was Helena, artist, survivor, and author of my own story, and this was just the beginning.